As drummers, we all love those moments in songs that sound something kind of like... But the reality is that a lot of songs that we play, especially when it comes to worship music, aren't always that big and jazzy all the time. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Worship Drumming. This is a channel where I do popular worship tutorials on the drums, as well as I do drum lessons based around a worship-centered context, which is today's lesson, based off a comment from Angel Anderson, who asks, a general drum tutorial on drumming slow worship songs would be helpful. I don't see any general drumming ballads videos, but that is what we struggle with the most. What are some drum techniques that keep the feel soft and slow, yet interesting, without dominating the entire music space? This is something that people have been asking themselves since the beginning of drumming whenever it comes to worship music. How do you still play things that are, first off, interesting, and second off, because drums are a big, powerful instrument, how do you do that without completely dominating all the other instruments, especially during like those soft or slow parts? So today I'm going to talk through a couple tools, some advantages and disadvantages of those tools that you can use to kind of achieve what you want. And then we'll go over some of those more specific techniques, like how would you actually play that? I have a guitar track that I recorded that I'll play along with all of my techniques, and it is me playing guitar, so you know, kind of give some grace there on how terrible it sounds. Starting with the tools, let's talk about the first one, which is a shaker. A shaker is a great way to soften the feel of whatever it is that you're playing. Now, this probably doesn't sound the best because it's being picked up by my lapel mic here, but this is just a simple vinyl shaker. I think I got it for Christmas or something like that. They have different sort of, I would say, harshness to them, where this one's really soft. It kind of sounds like sand is inside of here. They make some where it sounds like there's larger plastic beads inside of there, and it's a much more aggressive sound, I guess we could say. But having one like this gives a nice soft feel. Kind of teach you how to play one of these here in just a little bit if you're not exactly sure. Great way to soften the feel of things, especially if you're playing acoustic drums. Next is getting a pair of sticks like these. They're basically just kind of like dowel rods that are put together and then like just kind of binded all the way down, so that way they can be like drumsticks essentially. Now, what these do, I don't really have acoustic drums to hit here, but if you're playing acoustic drums, what this does essentially is whenever it hits, you can see it kind of spreads itself out. It softens that impact a lot, whereas this has absolutely no flex or anything to it. It just gives a nice loud hit, whereas this is kind of softening a lot of that impact and making the drums, one, kind of sound a little bit different, and two, it also softens your playing without you having to feel like you're like barely touching anything at all. Like you get to actually kind of still play somewhat normally. These are a really cool, great idea to really help you out. It's a really good all-around use, especially for, once again, when you want to play softer and quieter in those moments. The last thing I would say is getting yourself some mallets. These are especially good whenever it comes to cymbal swells. Now, obviously I don't have acoustic cymbals here, but using these in a soft moment in worship as a little way to swell some cymbals is a really good idea. Now, let's kind of go back through these and let's talk some advantages and disadvantages of these. The good thing about the shaker is that it keeps things soft, and the advantage is that you get that eighth note feel that you're still kind of keeping the rhythm. So that 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. And it's really nice for that. The only disadvantage is this, if you're playing in a small room, people can typically hear it across the room. But if you're playing in sort of a larger sanctuary, church, whatever you want to call it, then you're going to have to mic this. And that's not usually a huge issue. The only time that that becomes an issue is when your mic is like sitting way over here or something and you're having to do this while doing stuff with your other hand, and it just kind of makes it awkward, especially your shoulder gets a little tired after a while, depending on how long you do that for. The other disadvantages you just noticed, let's say that I do have a stick in this hand and I'm playing the shaker here, and let's say that I'm done softening the song and I want to kind of make it more intense. Well, then I have to have a place to set this. Then I have to come pick up my stick or whatever else I want to pick up and then keep playing from there. These have some really good advantages, these kind of dowel rod drumsticks. They allow you to play normal, just like you normally would an acoustic kit, still get some pretty good sounds and everything out of your drums for the most part. But once again, the disadvantages, these are basically taking up your hands. So if you need to switch to your normal pair of sticks, then you're gonna have to have, once again, a place to set these down and be able to pick these up. You're gonna notice that that's kind of the disadvantage of a lot of this stuff. And then lastly, at least acoustically, we're gonna get to some electronic stuff here in a moment. The mallets, once again, these have the advantage of sounding really great on the cymbals, especially doing those nice soft cymbal swells and everything that you want. Great for kind of cross stick stuff. If you ever want to do cross stick on the snare, we'll talk more about that. You can still get a nice full cross stick sound because this isn't as weak as this is, because this, once again, takes a lot of impact off, whereas this will still give you that nice impact for if you want to do cross stick on the snare. Now, that disadvantage is that you can't necessarily always play these on a snare drum and make the snare drum sound soft, but you can kind of get some softness out of the toms and whatnot. And once again, you have to put these down and pick up normal sticks whenever you're ready to switch, if you have to do that during a song. Now, if you're using any of this stuff and you're just going to use it for the whole song, obviously there's no disadvantage to having to set it down and then pick something else up, because it's pretty much there the whole time, because then by the time that song ends, you put it down, you start a new song. Talk about electronics. I have one down here, but a great thing to use for softening the feel is a multi-pad. So I'll show you my multi-pad here in a moment, but this is great because you can put all the sounds that any of this stuff would make, from cymbal swells to shaker to anything like that. You can put it inside of a multi-pad to get that sound from it. The only disadvantage is, while these cost maybe like 20 bucks, maybe like 10 bucks, maybe like 10 bucks or something like that, that costs like about $200 or more. Depending on especially what kind you get. So there's the only kind of disadvantage to that. Now that I've laid out a bunch of tools for you, let's go ahead and start talking about techniques. As we talk through these techniques, I'm gonna first start off without using any of the tools. We'll get to the multi-pad and some of the other stuff here in a moment. But for right now, we're just gonna talk, let's say you just had a normal acoustic drum kit or maybe an electronic drum kit like I had. Let's start talking through softening the feel. As I give you each technique and tip, I'm going to then play it along with the guitar track that I have recorded. So let's start off with something that's maybe not gonna bring it down a ton, but we can still get a good amount of sort of softness and feel to it. So we're gonna use our ride cymbal, our hi-hats, and our kick drum. Now, the kick drum, on pretty much everything that we're gonna play, the kick drum is only going to be playing on beat 1. We're pretty much not gonna play it any other time. We're gonna be using a lot of accents with our left hand and kind of keeping time with our right hand, kind of like a normal drum groove for the most part anyways. This first one, we're gonna just keep light eighth notes on the ride cymbal. Like, I'm trying to barely touch this thing. I'm just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and try to keep that real nice and soft. Then I'm going to be playing my hats on 2 and 4, so it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then once again the kick drum's just on 1. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and as I go through this, I could also kind of mess around with what I'm doing on the hi-hat. So I know I'm saying I'm keeping it on 2 and 4, but maybe on 4 I want to give it a nice little ring. So I'm like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that's part of that, keeping it interesting without it being super boring for you to play or for other people to listen to. So guitar track that I'm playing is at 65 BPM. Let's see how that technique would sound going along with that track. So you can hear how kind of switching up the hi-hat there a little bit gives it a little bit of a different feel and keeps it a little interesting, gives you also something to kind of do without necessarily getting too bored there. You can also throw in some different accents there like I did at the end. I kind of put in a little fill there. Basically whatever accent patterns you have, just throw them in there on the hi-hat. Just make sure you're keeping it nice and light. Keeping with the kit, before we move on to those tools, let's talk about the snare drum. When it comes to the snare drum, we can just play some real light 16th notes on it, play some rolls here and there as well to fill in that space and still have a lot of rhythm going on as well. But once again, playing real light so that way we're not dominating the space. You're going to notice that a lot of this, hopefully it's sort of obvious that you need to be playing light so that way you're not dominating that space and overpowering the other instruments. So it'd be kind of something like this, just playing 16th notes, alternating right, left, so it's 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a... Now, I have this track really slow at 65 BPM. I might mess up here a little bit. I would more try to do this something closer to 70 BPM, so that way things fill in there a little bit better. Trying to do a combination of rolls and stuff definitely helps soften that feel. And then accent some of those hits, that way the band kind of knows where you're at, and that way you're not just sitting there just playing the same thing. Make it interesting. Accent like the beat 4 and beat 2, just like you normally would. I'll try to do my best to sample that here. So let's listen to this with the guitar track. By the way, kick drum's still on 1, just like always. So hopefully you can kind of hear and feel how those ghost notes that you're playing, along with some of those rolls, if you know how to play rolls, really kind of keeps everyone in time, keeps it somewhat interesting as well, really helps soften that feel without giving those really hard, like slapping backbeats on 2 and 4 and everything. Let's move on now to kind of talking more about integrating some tools into what we're doing. One thing that we could do is integrate something like a shaker here. Whenever it comes to a shaker, you're basically just keeping eighth notes. So if you don't know how to play a shaker, I'll try to do my best on this camera up here. So I hold the shaker just with my thumb on one end, all my fingers on the other end. I'm not like holding it in a fist or anything. I like to try to keep it up out of my palm. I'm just kind of moving my arm, thinking in like eighth notes kind of. It's pretty much just like what your hand would be doing while you're playing your ride cymbal, kind of more out here. But you're just kind of doing it with this hand. So you're just going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and you can hear that as you come back, it's going to give you those 16th notes in between. Forwards are my eighth notes, and then kind of when I'm bringing it back, those are my 16th notes. So 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. It takes a second to get used to, but once you can learn how to do that, it sounds really nice in place of a hi-hat. So instead of playing the hi-hat here to kind of keep everything rhythmically, we're going to be using a shaker. Because I don't really have a mic and everything to mic that up with and make it sound good, I have a shaker right here on my multi-pad. Now, along with the shaker, that's not gonna be enough usually, because playing the shaker, and then if you still got like a normal snare hit in there, it kind of sounds a little weird. We're gonna do a technique on the snare along with this, so I'm kind of giving you 2 in 1 right here. A technique called cross stick. So cross stick, typically I hold my stick something like this, where I'm grabbing it kind of more up, and notice that the fat end is actually going to be taking place of where the head would usually be. So the fat end is the direction of my index finger. And you place your hand kind of around the middle-ish of the snare. Let me turn my drums off. So the reason I have to turn my drums off here is because I don't have acoustic drums, so this doesn't really work on electronic drums unless you have like a very, very fancy roll-in kit that is able to do this. But to play cross stick, you just kind of put your hand somewhere in the middle. The stick needs to lie somewhere around the middle as well. And I just kind of grip the stick with my thumb and index finger, and then my other fingers are kind of spread out on the snare head to dampen the snare head so I don't get any overtones or any ringing that doesn't need to be there. Now this is going to sound terrible because this is an electronic drum, but if you do this on an acoustic drum and you do this, it sounds really, really nice. That's how you hear a lot of that sort of cross stick sounds and some of the music that you hear. So just playing that, and you can think about playing that on 2 and 4. So you're like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now once again, I can't do it here on this drum, but I have a sound that kind of has a lot of reverb and stuff, but basically it's a cross stick. Is that sound right there? And so let's use the shaker. So I'll play my shaker here. Let's use the cross stick for 2 and 4. Once again, keeping the kick drum on 1. Let's talk about some more tools that you could use. I don't have a tambourine with me, but if you have a tambourine mounted somewhere on your kit or something like this, that is also a really great sound to be able to use on those backbeats on 2 and 4. But instead of doing the same thing that we just did, instead of just kind of sitting here doing the same thing, just keeping that on 2 and 4, let's alternate those sounds. So on 2, I'll hit my cross stick, and on 4, I'll hit my tambourine. And I'll just keep playing the shaker like I was. So it'll be like this: 1E into 2E into 3E into 4E into 1E into 2E into 3E into 4E into... Once again, that keeps it a little more interesting, alternating hearing those sounds. This is something I do all the time whenever I'm trying to soften the feel of a song. So let's hear what it sounds like with the guitar. You probably noticed I got a little fancy there on the shaker. That's another advantage of having it here on the multipad, is I can play rolls and kind of get some really cool shaker sounds out of there. That's something that I do all the time. Let's say that you're like, okay, well, you're getting a little fancy with that shaker there, and I think that's overplaying. Okay, perfect. Then let's just completely take the shaker out. There's no longer any sort of rhythmic thing to hold down all of the eighth notes. It's now just us playing the kick on 1, the cross stick on 2, and the tambourine on 4. You could still just keep this where you're just playing the cross stick on 2 and 4, but we're just essentially, to soften the feel, we're eliminating any sort of rhythmic thing that's holding down the eighth note. So we're gonna let the guitar, the piano, the other instruments, we're gonna let those hold the time more. We're just gonna be playing the accent beats that you would usually hear in a groove. Now, if you have trouble playing this, which some people do, if it's your first time doing it and you're not holding something down, keeping you in time, just pat your stick on your leg as you do this. It'd be like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... It's just a way to keep yourself in time. There's nothing wrong with doing it. No rhythmic eighth notes or anything. We're just playing the main accents of the groove. Now, we can strip this down even more. Let's not even play the 2. Let's just play the 1 and the 4. Another thing I do all the time. I especially do this during communion. So if there's ever a time during communion while we're playing, if the musicians stay up there, I will typically play exactly what I'm about to show you because it just works really well. I'll just play the kick drum on 1, and I'll play the tambourine sound on 4, or it might be a cross stick sound or something on 4. It keeps it real simple. It's the time reference of here's the 1, here's the 4, so everyone in the band knows where we're at. You definitely are not overplaying at this point. Well, there you have it. I hope that these tips, tricks, and techniques all helped you out to be able to soften the feel of those worship songs while also trying to keep things interesting and not over dominating the music space at the same time. If you need to get yourself some of these tools, go ahead. You can pretty much find them at any music store that sells drum equipment, or on Amazon typically is a great place to look as well. Leave any comments below on future video suggestions that you may have, or any sort of questions you have about today's video. Also, leave a thumbs up if you learned something new, and subscribe below if you're interested in more content like this in the future. I'll see you guys in the next video.